Okay, we going live now, Barbara. Good morning, Dr. Barbara Johnson. How are you this morning?
Ron, I'm so great. Thank you. Been a busy, busy week, but very productive and very interesting how things happen in such beautiful synchronicity. Yeah. How was your week?
Yeah, it's busy, but it's you have to manage time. That's where the difficult part comes in. And hopefully, this chapter 8, what we're speaking about goals and what our goals might fit into what everybody can learn. You have to get back your time. You have to put the right goals in and you have to manage your time.
So important, Ron. Without management, we are lost, and all we then create is chaos. And hitting the dog or screaming at the spouse or whatever frustration manifests, hence the importance of this chapter. Yes.
Yeah, and some people will go through a couple of desks a year because they're slamming the desk or slamming the computer.
Correct.
Yeah, so, Barbara, one of the questions is, how do you define your goals in this chapter?
Well, the first thing I do in my book, Yes, Yes, You, 10 Stepping Stones to Get On With Your Life, in this chapter number 8, goals, my question is, what goals? So it's all very well, Ron, having goals, but we have to determine whether they are our goals and not somebody else's. You know, we are so conditioned to be people pleasers, to fall naturally into our conditioning, that we do not always know what are our goals, what turns our lights on, what makes us happy. So the question is, what goals? And goals around what in your life? As you know, my next book has been published. The process of this book is around asking questions about our goals across 8 dimensions of life, Ron. Not just 1 or 2 or 5, but 8. Goal setting is for the wholeness, for the full potential of ourselves, so that we can live, Ron, into a full expression of a human experience, not via the conditioning, not via the limited mindset, not via the inconsistencies and the pain of our emotions, but through self-esteem, 8 dimensions, and us taking charge of our lives, our goals.
Barbara, it's so important what you said there, and I'm just looking, and it might go off the subject a bit, but I think especially a lot of people listening to it, a lot of us has got a job, and our goal is to be better in that job. But the boss's goal is how many people can I use to sell your time for your income that he can establish this lifestyle that he wants because he knows how to buy back his time. The sad part is saying that is parents, on the other hand, wants to live through their kids, especially now going to universities is just get a degree, just get a diploma, just get a job. But some of us might have that passion of becoming that entrepreneur, and you lose that because at the end of the day, your goal gets lost. I mean, being in the financial literacy game, I've seen it so many times where big arguments take place where a woman spends 18 years looking after the kids and she wants to get back into a goal and she loses that. Because when she started, she had this great vision. But as soon as marriage and kids come in, she loses that passion, that purpose, that goal. And sometimes you don't have to lose it because what the person has got, and especially in your book, and that 8 dimensions of life, I believe this is where a person can start focusing on self and being self and growing self in your goals. And it's not about money. It's maybe just getting that pair of shoes you always wanted. I'm just using that as an example. So, which brings
Well,
me,
it looks like this, Ron.
yep,
This is how it looks. Our life is meant to be full and balanced. Exactly right. And so many women, especially women, give up their goals, give up their life plan to have a family. And then that gets diluted over time simply because there isn't time, or they've lost passion, or they've been discouraged, or, as I'm seeing so much more of these days, they're being abused physically, mentally, emotionally. And then they lose themselves in the reality that is, instead of setting themselves up with the remembrance, the feeling, the emotional connection to having that goal of life purpose. And again, just to go back to your story about a woman for 18 years being a mom, that lady needs to then repurpose her life. Repurpose so that she has new goals, Ron. She has new goals that are taking her from this reality into a greater, bigger, more acceptable for her soul reality.
Which brings me to the other point is, what is the balance between responsibility and liberty in goal setting?
Oh, wow, what a great question. So what we're not taught, often we're not taught, is that, especially in women, this is the thing I see a lot of in women. We're not taught to have a plan. We're not taught to want any more than being told and living into barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. We are not taught that we have choices. We are brought up with a mindset, and then very often that mindset is carried through with a spouse. And because that mindset is carried through, it's understandable, because he too was brought up with a mindset that was limiting, not only to himself, but what he can expect in a relationship, in a wife, in a family situation. Choice, number one. We have choice. And when we understand that we actually don't have to live by a prescription of somebody else's, i.e., your story earlier on about the boss. Because quite frankly, Ron, if we do not have a plan for ourselves, we will be pulled by the nose into somebody else's plan. We will sell our money, we will sell our time for money, as you mentioned. So once we understand that we have freedom of choice, liberty, that we have liberty, and that it is our God-given right at birth to have liberty, we then create the chance and the need to take responsibility for that choice. And that responsibility, Ron, looks like self-focus, self-direction, self-motivation, self-leadership. In other words, giving up the blaming, giving up the excuses, the denial, giving up justification for what it is we want in our lives, giving up that concept of quitting on ourselves. Responsibility and choice go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. We've got to marry them and take ownership of them, create the plan, and follow through.
And Barbara, that's important what you just said. Have a plan and follow through. And it reminds me of the book Think and Grow Rich. And one of the sayings is, plan your work and work your plan. Whatever the mind can conceive, it can achieve. And so, especially with the new book you're busy writing, is your journaling plays a vital role of plan your work to work your plan, So in that is every day you're doing goal settings. Doesn't matter if you're going to make a breakfast. Doesn't matter if you're going to stand up the next morning. You still, but some of the plans is driving a car. We get so used to when you start driving a car, clutch in first gear, clutch out second gear. And at the end of the day, that goal of just driving becomes a habit. And we forget about what's actually happening by our conditioning. And I think we're so used to doing things on a daily basis. We're so scared to move out of our comfort zone, what other people's going to say, what our social media is going to say, what's my friends going to say. But at the end of the day, when you get to a certain age, you don't give a damn because you just want your time because time is limited. And the question comes in, how can listeners create goals that reflect their own life creation?
Well, first of all, people need to create for themselves a sense of being worthy to have goals, to create for themselves a sense of esteem, if you will, that each of us have a life purpose on this earth, that we can actually create for ourselves off little systems like planning for ourselves with ourselves per day. You mentioned my next book around journaling. Yes, Ron, if we do not sit with ourselves and be with ourselves at least once a day, how are we going to show up in the world as full, expressive, creative human beings? And here's the funny thing, Ron. Very often it is in the desperation, in the frustration that we live into our lives that actually can be the catalyst for the creation of a new plan. Too many of us do not understand what it is that we want. So if we do not understand what it is that we want, then utilize what you've got. Utilize the frustration, the despair, the depression, the despondency, the anxiety, the addictions, the aggression. Utilize it. Use that as the compost, if you will, for this beautiful orchid to be grown from, for the plan, for the goals, for you setting a way forward for your life.
And you know what? It's so true what you say there, Barbara, is, and I just want to go back to my own life, is when I started in business, I always focused on the people with big cars, big houses, but their bank balance is zero. They live in debt. And we've got that false impression, these people are wealthy. And I got caught into the trap because I was living in their dreams and they were manipulating me to look after their lifestyle. We looked after their kids. I was looking after 4 families because I feel sorry because I think and this is where the key comes in. And I go back to my parents, especially my mother. Just be generous. Always give to other people and you will receive, which for me is a lot of BS. If I can't look after myself, how can I look after others? Because I was brought up, just be nice, stop looking for arguments, be the least, all of those. And that's understand why my parents never succeeded, because they always worked for a job. But then family and friends came in and I was that person till I got into financial difficulty. Then I realized, where's friends and family? Nobody wanted to help. I lived out of Coke bottles. But that's what you said. You figure out that pain first, to find self first, to grow self, and then you start putting those goals together. Because then you know what your direction is. But you have to go through pain. and I just want to use another story. Is a friend of a mutual friend. I won't mention names. She was going through a difficulty. The husband didn't want to do anything. She didn't even have electricity in her house. He ran a cable through the next door neighbor just to have electricity. She said, "What must I do?" I says, "Start looking after self." And she did. She had to go through a divorce. At the end of the day, she got the car she wanted. She's got the house she wanted, but she had to move out of that comfort zone with the negativity from the kids, the negativity from others. But now the kids are working for her. It just shows you how the circle turns. But you first have to look after self.
There's no strength. There's no strength, Ron, if there isn't the self. If the tree cannot be planted deep in it with its roots, the tree cannot stand up. And we as human beings are exactly like that. We have to be able to ground ourselves so that we can present and show ourselves from a place of strength, not from a place of weakness.
So Barbara, why is understanding personal responsibility so important?
It's vital, because without it, we're sitting waiting for the white horse to arrive. We're sitting waiting for somebody else's plan to meld with our own. We're sitting waiting, not growing our lives on the presumption that something will turn up. We have to come from a place of steadfastness, even if it's in teeny weeny little actions. Because here's the thing, Ron. It's by taking actions. They may not be ideal. They may not be the big picture, but they are a starting point. And that starting point triggers our imagination, triggers our mindset, triggers our self-esteem, triggers us to know that we are taking action. Just by taking action, Ron, we are triggering the universe. We are triggering other people. We are showing up that there is not the ideal picture happening, but something is happening, that we are determined, that we are focused, that we are committed to creating something out of the little steps. It is our job to be responsible, not somebody else's job to be responsible. It is our job, if we need to, because it happens in life, if we need to be big enough to ask for help. We need to be gracious enough to receive help. We need to be strong enough to reciprocate, and we need to be able to, yes, be generous to others when they are in need. But it comes from a place of our strength and our capacity, and not from the mindset, the conditioning of, for whatever reason and in whatever way, just give. Because if we can't be fully in capacity with ourselves, how on earth are we going to give to others? Because then we teach them that weakness is okay. It's not about weakness. It's about finding strength. It's about finding our own plan. It's about finding who we are in this process. And when I come from that place to receive and to give, it's a very different energy flow. And as a result, energy does flow.
And Barbara, what I've found quite interesting what you just said there is that if you start saying to your spouse or to a boss, or saying to him, listen, I feel you need to do this in a proper business manner, sometimes they will take a step back, but will create a conversation to find out how you can go to the right direction. The question is, you need to say in a way that both parties can see what your goal is. And that's I'm going to do this. Is how you choose your right question that both parties can see, hang on, that is the direction. Doesn't matter if you got a newborn, who's going to change a nappy at night? And sometimes the husband will just look at it with a peg on his nose and says, no, it's not me. You know, but it's your responsibility. Get sick. It's both in the same relationship. You know, but communicate. If you don't want to do the poo nappy, it's fine. But just change the nappy. Just get something done. But it's how you change that nappy. But it's a conversation how you're going to start putting together of getting your common goal together. Which sometimes, which is quite nice, is to go what you and I are doing every Friday morning, to get yourself a mentor to work with, not in the same industry, or it could be in the same industry, to figure out how can your mentor or your mentee help you to get to your goal. It might not work now, but sometimes that's great to have that goal in maybe losing weight, or just starting a business, or you have to get into social media or AI, all of this. Just get somebody. You cannot do it alone. You have to have a responsibility person. That's my opinion. And which brings me to the point, how people can avoid setting goals that they don't like. Let me rephrase. How do people avoid setting goals that they don't fit them?
So I've recently done a workshop on the release and the achievements of 2025. And I do believe that when we set goals, we need to have a look at, so what did work and what didn't work? What kind of worked that I can tweak and make more of? The things that did work, okay, let's do more of that. The things that didn't work, well, let's let that go, but learn from them, so that when we come to the new goal setting, we have some kind of basis to work off. It's not just cold turkey. You don't just sit down one day with a piece of paper and a pen and say, okay, where's my life going? Well, nobody would do anything if that was the approach. But if the approach is, what fires me up? What worked recently? What didn't work? How can I get more of what did work? What can I discern and let go of? What is something I need to absolutely avoid at all cost? What questions, for instance, what goal should I or could I be creating in this being as I am now? Ron, I'm nearly 72. My goals are very different to when I was 45. At 72, I am for the first time in my life on my own. And I love it. So my goal needs to be realistic in my new reality, in my new environment, in my 8 dimensions of life, across who I am now and who I want to become. So it isn't about doesn't fit. We got to make a plan to create ourselves into what does fit, on the premise, on the experience, on the past that can serve us. That can serve us. Because what does not serve us, it's a waste of time bringing that into a new goal. Okay? And I am just want to be a little cautious here, because some people are saying, but I've been doing this for 25 years. I love this. No, it's not working. It hasn't been working very well. But for some of us, there's a purpose that we know in the deep depths of ourselves that we can carry fire for the purpose. Some goals, Ron, don't need to be cancelled. Some goals just need a longer time frame. And only ourselves can work that out. Because if it is value add to self and humanity, for instance, then time frame is of the lesser importance than the purpose itself.
And Barbara, it's so important what you just said. And people might be 25 years in their goal setting, but never achieved their goals. And there's one thing I'm going to say is the reason why people don't achieve their goals because they don't write it down and they don't see it. And
100%. 100%.
And the question is, sometimes a goal is too big to achieve. So if you want a multi-million rand house and you've got a poor mindset, you're never going to get that multi-million rand house. Because how many times have you driven past and says, oh, I'd love to have that big house, but you've never written it down. It's a sacrifice that you need to do. And talking about this, I was listening to Steve Harvey night before last. And his friend said to him, why don't you become a comedian, and went to a comedy club. And he won $50. The next day he resigned, and because he thought he can make money out as a comedian. It cost him 3 years to sleep in his car. He sacrificed. But he wrote 300 goals down and he looked at it on his piece of paper. But what he said is, if I want to buy that book, you haven't got the money, put 10% or 5% away and get that book. When you buy that book, go reward yourself in a coffee shop, have a cup of coffee while you're reading a book because you achieved something that you put forward. So your goals must be rewarded in what you want to achieve. So my goal is I'm going to cut the lawn. Reward it with a cool drink thereafter because you've set that goal. The goal is not to have how much money or the jet or the cars, whatever. That's long-term goal. Look at short-term, medium, and long-term, and look at it every day. And one of the key things is, and I think you will agree with me, and I learned this from you when I saw you about 15, 16 years ago, and the first thing I saw is this big vision board of Barbara Johnson with your Googling and everything like that next to it, and journaling and everything else that links to what you've been putting together, because you pinned it up to show what your direction is. And that's when I start learning. And I've started putting stuff like that together, and it works because you have to see it every day. If you're going to chase a target, let's say, for instance, you're in sales and you want to do 10 deals a day, put 10 deals a day in front of the mirror where you brush your teeth, where you drive your car, that you can see it because it'll sit in here. Because I think this is where people miss, because it always starts with a New Year's resolution. Doesn't matter which month you're in, because everybody's going to start something but never achieve it. So how do these goals tie into the first 7 stepping stones, Barbara?
Well, the 7 stepping stones of the book, Yes, Yes, You, are actually all interlinked. This book is actually a system in its own right. 10 stepping stones that have come off 23 years of trauma counseling and life coaching. And the very first chapter is exactly about what you spoke about now. Write it down. Because when we write it down, we can see it, We can feel it as we're writing. We have a sensory experience when we are writing it down. We get to give our brain a check-in point for our reality. Does this work? Does this not work? How can I make it work? Is this worth pursuing? Everything, Ron, in this book is interconnected as a process for internal development of who we are now and who we want to become. This process is about the how to do a better life for ourselves. We're not taught this. We're just told we need to be better people, but we're not taught how to be better people. And it is that internal process, it is that internal development, it is us from the inside out that makes the difference here. Write it down, absolutely. Track yourself, absolutely. Find a way of measuring your growth. Find a way of finding the right people to support you. You alluded a moment ago to accountability people, accountability partners. Have those people in your life. This is how we grow. This is how we show up better. If we were left on our own, Ron, it's too easy to just pull the duvet over our heads and not get on with life. And yes, some days we have days like that. I had a day like that yesterday. I had actually overexhausted myself the day before, and yesterday was a duvet day. It's about balance. Over time, it's about balance. We have to listen to the internal so that when we need rest, we can take rest. When we need to act, we can act from a place of energy, Ron. And on that note, I'd love to just state one beautiful experience that I had this week, and that was about letting down a wall. I let down a wall. Yes, even I have walls. We still have walls, even into our old age. Our purpose of this life is to grow into bigger, better, bolder, more beautiful people than when we came into this world and when we were conditioned in this world. It takes work. And we are so conditioned with walls of energy that it takes time for the subconscious to let it go or to be available in the conscious mind. Hence the importance of journaling. And once the wall came down, Ron, I could physically feel the inflow of positive energy. Now that stirred me and propelled me into the most amazing energy and productivity, engagement and connection that whole day. The flow of energy is required. It can come when we take down the walls.
And Barbara, it's so important. There's another story which a friend of mine, she just got into the real estate business. She's been there 2 years. The first year is, did I make the right choice? Yeah. And all of a sudden, she figured it out. She figured out that pain. And all of a sudden, she found her purpose. And I mean, she sold in the last three months, I think 3 or 4 properties because she figured out what her pain was. Because I want to close on a question. What is the key takeaway about gold creation in life?
Goals are your friend. They grow you. The frustration and the overwhelm also grow you. If you see them from a place of productivity, of the universe telling us something, but we're not listening. So when we start to listen, when we start to write out the pain, when we start to take the responsibility of the pain, when we start to take ownership of the pain and let go the excuses and the blaming, etc., when we start to change our frame of thinking, when we start to grow our mindset, when we start to have compassion for ourselves, when we start to journal, when we start to take actions, we can come into the place of self, growth, future from a very different perspective, from a place of compassion, from a place of self-awareness and discovery and consciousness of what is hidden underneath it all, so that we can stand tall without the wall, and we can allow ourselves to flow up and allow new energy to flow in.
Barbara, thanks a lot for a great session. Next week, Wednesday, we're on chapter 9. So, guests who's ever listening or watching, the links will be in Facebook. It is also in YouTube. Subscribe to Barbara Johnson's book in Amazon. And I just want to leave you guys with a quote. Life without risk is life half lived. Write down your goals. As Napoleon Hill said, plan your work and work your plan. Whatever the mind can conceive, it can achieve. So on that note, be awesome and be great.